I ended up in Baldoyle. We lived in Swords. My mother became a widow when she was 39. She had 6 children, and she moved to Baldoyle to be nearer to her family in Howth. Her sisters and her brothers were still living in Howth, and we moved to 26 Marian Park. Marian Park had just opened. At the time it wasn't called Marian Park, it was called Tullier, and was called that for a few years after. There were 60 houses in Marian Park, and they were fantastic neighbours, very good people, very good people. We had a shop in Marian Park. It was owned Mrs. Gannon, and her husband owned the shop, and they used to let our parents, and when we became teenagers, they used to let us run up tick, you know, where you'd get something and you wouldn't have enough money and you'd pay when you got your wages. They were very, very good. And then moving up down the road, there was Mr. Brennan. People at the time, there was nobody rich, certainly not us. Mr. Brennan used to have a box cart, and people used to get vouchers for turf. And the depot was in Baldoyle behind the clinic. I think it's where Cosgrave's Yard is now. And people used to get vouchers, and Mr. Brennan used to go down in a box cart and sometimes an old pram, and he'd collect the turf for my mother and other people. But I remember him doing it for Mammy, and she'd give him 5 Woodbines, and everybody was delighted. Moving up Marian Park, opposite number 26 where I grew up, there was a park which is now leads down to the station to and the daddies in Marian Park, a few of them built what's now called allotments, but a few of them grew vegetables in that park. And when they took what they wanted and what they needed, they gave the rest to the residents of Marian Park. And many's a good dinner we got out of that. And when moving on then around the corner, we had good neighbours and good friends, good friends. The kids in Marian Park, I think we drove the neighbours mad, absolutely mad. We had great games, we really had. I never remember it raining when I was a child. I never remember the rain. Must have, but I never remember it. We had a neighbour around the corner from us on the curve, and she grew rhubarb and cabbage. But, excuse me, she also had hens in the garden. And she shared that rhubarb with everybody. You couldn't pass by without a bit of rhubarb. And then passing around the circle, and I apologise if I'm leaving anybody out, because they were great people, fantastic. But moving on around there, we had mostly around my mother's end of it, because we were on the corner. But we used to tie a bit of wool loosely on somebody's knocker and tie it loosely on somebody else's knocker, and we'd hide behind the wall and pull the piece of wool, and it'd knock on the 2 doors at the same time. And when it knocked at the 2 doors, the 2 mammies came out at the same time, if the daddies were at work. And I don't remember it being dark. I think it was always bright when I was a child. The days were bright, and the 2 mammies came out, and each thought the other had knocked or something. I don't know how it worked out that they were talking, but that's how it happened. We didn't have computers. We didn't have televisions. I promise you, we didn't get a television until I was a teenager. And it was black and white, like a box. And it started at 6 o'clock with a picture of like this, like a Bridget's cross. And it started with the Angelus, and Mammy used to, say a prayer when the Angelus came on at 6 o'clock. Every home had a straw version of this St. Bridget's cross. It's a very Irish item to have, and we had one in our homes. We played ball. We didn't play football as such. We played 2 balls up again the shed door, or the front door if your mammy wasn't there, and we played playing while you have the ball, quick before you let it fall, and under while you have the ball. But we played that for hours. There was no fighting. When you were out, if you missed where you were going with the ball, it was somebody else's turn. Nobody cheated. Nobody fought that I can remember. And I think it was mostly a girls' game. I have a fantastic memory of comics. When the eldest girl in our family, my sister Mary, she started work and she bought comics. And we bought the Bunty, the Judy. Mary bought the Roxy and the Valentine because they were sort of leaning towards romance. And the Bunty, the Judy. And I used to swap them. And I had a particular few friends that I'd go to swap them. You never went into their house. You knocked on the door, you asked for whoever it was you swapped with, and the door opened. And I think most of us had cardinal red paint on our halls. Don't know if anybody remembers that. With cardinal red polish shining up at us. And we put the comics out, and you say, did you read that? And the person, and Little Lulu was another comic, and you'd say, did you read that? I'll swap you that for that. And then other ones came out, 64ers, but I just remember the colour and then you read them and you went to somebody else to swap them with different type of comic that of their choice. But they were great memories. Skipping was fantastic. You just went either side of the road. There wasn't really any motor cars. You never had to get out of anybody's way. And if you could afford a car, you were a millionaire. There was playing skipping was you turned the rope and you skipped and skipped. There was no purpose behind it at all, to be honest with you. And you skipped as long as you could until you were out. Now what I think about is mad, isn't it? We had in the village outside the old church, we had what was called a pitch and toss school. It wasn't a school at all. It was where the youths gathered. They used to toss the money up, and whatever way it landed, heads or tails, they were the winner. And I'm not sure of what way it worked, because my mother used to go mad if anybody in our family was caught down at the pitch and toss school. But we did have great fun. We used to sit in the park opposite where Houlihan's lived and where Annie Nangle lived, and we used to we used to sit in the park and throw pennies. Now we hadn't an awful lot of them, but we used to throw them up against the wall, and whoever got nearest the wall was still in until eventually the nearest to the wall won the money. Do you understand me? You were out, and you won that money, and you were the talk of the place for having that few bob. It was absolutely a different world, a healthy world. Like, we thought rhubarb was great. You can't give kids rhubarb nowadays. If you told them to go out and throw money around, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't believe you. What else do I remember? Myself, now just talking for a second, I spent a lot of my childhood playing with my friend Liz Crudden in Midland Cottage in the Grange Road. It was over the bridge, over as known now as Furnaces Bridge, the Humpback Bridge, but in that time we called it Shaw's Bridge, because going over the bridge was Mrs. Shaw and her husband, and he worked on the railroad, and because he was Mr. Shaw, we called it Shaw's Bridge. And then down at the end of that bridge in Midland Cottage was the Crudden family, and they were just part of my childhood and part of a lot of the childhood of people in Baldoyle. Mrs. Crudden used to walk down to visit my mother, and she really, the innocence of people in them days, they weren't allowed smoke, you know, they used to go to each other's houses for smoke. I don't know why, but children walked from, at that time it was called the Hole in the Wall, but it was sort of up towards Balgriffin, up where Trinity Sports Club is now. There was all cottages along there, and the children walked from there down to Baldoyle School, which was run by the Sisters of Charity. And no qualms, they got wet. Nobody did anything, it was just rain. And one of our classrooms was in the convent, actually. And when we made our Holy Communion, that was my Holy Communion there was a grotto in our school yard, and we all got our photograph taken at the grotto. The grotto was Our Lady's grotto, and we all got our photograph taken at the grotto. At the time we thought she was very tough, but sometimes when I meet ladies my own age now, we have a laugh, because we can't give back the knowledge that we have. We were introduced to our religion in the Baldoyle Church, and also through our parents, through our mothers. We have the brown scapular, the green scapular, and the miraculous medal. We all wore miraculous medals, those of us who believed in our Blessed Lady. Holy water was in 90% of the houses in Marian Park. And this Child of Prague statue here, it came in many sizes, but there was a landing window on the top of the stairs in Marian Park, and I honestly thought that that's what the landing window was for, because every house had a Child of Prague statue. When somebody was going to get married in these 60 houses, the Child of Prague was put out in the front garden, so that the Child of Prague would make sure it didn't rain. That was the faith people had. And I don't know if it rained or not, I don't remember. But I remember that when the wedding day came, us children stood outside that person's gate waiting for a Grushee. And that was where somebody in the wedding party threw lots of money, coppers, up in the air, and we fought for that money. We got down on the ground to collect that money, and we were delighted. I think then we brought it down and rolled it up again, Houlihan's Wall, and it was fantastic. And went to Mrs. Gannon, God bless her. These are a few of the people who I remember so well, and I'm sorry I don't have all their photographs. Really wish I had. But these gentlemen would have helped encourage the younger folk to get active with the football. And this here would be Mr. Gordon, Mr. Barry, Mr. Farrell, Mr. Flaherty, Mr. Flaherty, Mr. Higgins. Mr. Higgins lived right opposite our house, and Mr. Curtin. So in this photograph are the sons of some of these men, and some of the sons probably didn't have a father, and I respect that. But if you can recognise yourself in the photograph, I hope it brings back a lovely memory to you, and I hope you can show your grandson, maybe even a great-grandson, this lovely memory of your day in Marian Park, Baldoyle. I did. I moved back to Marian Park in 1974, and I went on to have 6 children. But meanwhile, I helped out. I helped the old folk in Baldoyle, mature citizens, I call them now because I'm one myself. And I used to take the younger children on day trips, you know, when you'd hire a special bus and the children would give a few shillings and we'd take them all off at no cost to the adults, you know. They'd bring a packed lunch and we'd take them to the zoo or to the cinema, and sure, they had a great day, and the mammies had a break. That was the whole thing. And then it was somebody else's turn to do so. And and those children do remember. They really do remember. My friend Kathleen Nolan down the road here, she used to do, for a long time, she used to do the kit for the adult team of football players here. And yeah, no bother to her. She had a washing machine and she got on with it. Her husband played football, and she got on with that. My husband wasn't into the football then, and so it didn't. I was into the darts. I was one of the women who started the dart club in the racecourse in Baldoyle, and we did that for a good few years. And we went on to win a few leagues in the Fingal League. Yeah. I find I'm blessed that I have the children that could knock and hand in food through the window and phone me. But I find that an awful lot of people don't understand computers, and that's not their fault. That's no harm. I couldn't understand them until family sat down for hours with me and taught me. But most things nowadays is go online and download this form. Some people don't have any way of getting up to the civic office in Coolock, and they have to get a bus and another bus or a taxi. And if we had somebody with a job, you know, my feelings are, God bless the volunteers, but as long as there's volunteers, there'll be a dole queue a mile long. If they took 2 people off the dole and gave them a paid job of going around and helping people to download a form, like a helpline where the person would phone a certain number for the elderly and the not so elderly and say, listen, I'm applying for a grant or I'm applying for my pension and I don't know how to do this. You know, because there's a queue in the post office, and the way we are at the moment, wearing masks, I find you're standing so much away from people that you're shouting out your name, your phone number, your details, and you don't know, honestly, in this day and age, and do you live alone, do you not? Like, I find that in hospitals also, and they're going to have to get around that, because you're telling people your business and you don't know. You know, I suppose I'll have to learn to trust people more, but I've spoken to this about this to my friends, and they agree. They'd love somebody to come around, maybe answer the phone and leave your name for a call to say, hiya, can you help me go over this form? And, you know, these are my details. And they'll call up and help you. Not everybody has broadband. I felt the information was very confusing because they were telling you one thing on the television, and if you walked out of the room, you came back in, there was a different bit of information. So I did depend on family to give me facts. Do you understand me? And I'm not stupid, I hope, but there was, like, my husband was explaining to me, but you know, it changed all the time. All I knew is there was a lock-in, but I did look out, and there was people who I thought were maybe the same age as me. I'm 70 now, and I couldn't understand. There were still gatherings of young people, and there were still people. I don't think people really listened. So I think that's where you need a helpline, where you say, will you explain to me exactly what's going on? I'll tell you a funny story about my own family. We had a supermarket. When the supermarket opened here, excuse me, the lady in the supermarket, when you had to sell by weight and measure, it had to be proper. So sometimes the washing powder and other items broke or got burst. So she wrapped the washing powder into a plastic bag, knotted it, and sold it off. So instead of paying X amount for the washing powder, you got it much cheaper. So I used to send my daughter down I used to send Cathy down. I say, go down and see if they've any burst washing powder, and if they have, get it for me, please. So Cathy went down, no bother, and then one day she realised, Ma'am, I'm not going down anymore. I'm not asking for that. I thought, that's okay, that's all right. Well, Daniel said, Ma, I'll go down. And down Daniel went. And I said, are you sure? He said, I'm not going to be giving out. I'm going down, Ma, for you. So Daniel went down, came back about half an hour later. I'm sure the shop was only down the racecourse shopping centre. And he came back with the bag. The bags were free then, you didn't have to pay for them. Came back with the bag of washing powder. And there was that many holes in it, it was like a tea bag. And he said, Ma'am, he said, I got it for you. I said, God bless you, son. And all I could say, it was a new journey starting for me. I wouldn't have to bribe Cathy into going anymore, God bless her. And Dan said, you know what, Ma, I didn't even have to ask for it. I bought it, and on the way up the road, I burst it with my foot. And he paid the full whack for it. It was the last time Daniel was ever asked to get me the washing powder down the shop. And that's a perfectly true story.